He thought his badge made him untouchable. He thought no one would ever question his authority. But the day he brought the wrong woman to court was the day his lies, his power, and his career came crashing down. This isn't just a story about a traffic stop. It's about one woman's fight against a system built to silence her, and how she turned the courtroom into a battlefield for justice. It all began with a smirk, the kind of smirk that comes from years of unchecked power. Officer Daniel Brooks sat in his patrol car under the dim glow of a streetlight, sipping stale coffee and scrolling through his phone. 12 years on the force had earned him a decorated uniform, dozens of commendations, and a reputation that kept his name whispered in both respect and fear around the city. But there was another side to Daniel, a darker one. Behind the badge, there was arrogance, a belief that he could do no wrong. He'd stopped people without reason, escalated minor incidents into arrests, and twisted reports to favor his narrative. His fellow officers either didn't notice or didn't dare speak. After all, Daniel was protected, untouchable. Every complaint against him somehow disappeared in red tape. Internal affairs, useless. He was smart enough to avoid body cam footage when it mattered, and charming enough to talk his way out of anything. Until one rainy Thursday night, when everything changed. Maria Torres had never even heard of Officer Daniel Brooks before that moment. She was a 26-year-old law student in her final year, known among her peers as fiercely intelligent and impossibly calm under pressure. She spent her evenings volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping victims of abuse understand their rights and navigate the justice system. Her dream was to become a civil rights lawyer. That night, around 10:30 p.m., Maria was driving home after a long shift at the shelter. The rain was coming down hard and visibility was low. Still, she drove carefully, her phone away, speed within limit, seatbelt buckled. She had no idea a patrol car was following her. No idea that inside that cruiser was a man looking for someone to flex his authority on. The red and blue lights flashed in her rear-view mirror. Maria pulled over calmly, rolling down her window just enough for the officer to speak. She greeted him with a polite smile. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Daniel didn't smile back. His tone was cold, even aggressive. "License and registration. You know why I stopped you?" "I'm not sure," she replied. "You were speeding, swerving a little too," he added, glancing at her ID. "Law student, huh?" Maria nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm heading home from work." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You think that makes you special?" She blinked, confused. "No, I was just explaining why I'm out this late." He leaned closer, narrowing his eyes. "People like you always think you can talk your way out, but not tonight." That phrase stuck with her. Was it her skin tone, her confidence, her education? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. But something in her eyes must have challenged him, because that's when he snapped. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked. Maria was stunned, but complied. What followed was shocking. Daniel claimed she resisted. He twisted her arm unnecessarily while cuffing her. He told dispatch he was dealing with a non-compliant subject. And then he confiscated her phone, stating it was evidence. 3 charges followed: reckless driving, resisting arrest, and verbal aggression, all fabricated. At the police station, while she sat in the holding cell, her mind wasn't filled with fear. It was focused. She wasn't just a scared detainee, she was a woman who understood every step of the law. And more importantly, she knew how to use it. An officer passed by, sneering as he looked at her file. She smiled faintly. "You just messed with the wrong woman," she whispered to herself. The police report said it was just another routine stop. But nothing about it was routine. Maria Torres sat alone on a bench in the holding area of the precinct, hands still sore from the too tight handcuffs Officer Daniel Brooks had slapped on her hours earlier. Her blazer was wrinkled, her phone gone, and her wrists carried faint red marks. Yet her eyes weren't tired. They burned, not with rage, but with purpose. Rewind just a few hours earlier. Maria had been driving down Route 19, a two-lane stretch just outside the city. She knew the road well. She'd driven it dozens of times. Her car, an old but reliable Honda Civic, hugged the lane slowly through the pouring rain. She wasn't speeding. She wasn't distracted. She was just tired. Tired from a full day of studying, followed by her weekly volunteer shift at the women's shelter. Then came the sirens. When Officer Brooks approached her vehicle, Maria sensed something off. His body language wasn't just assertive, it was hostile. She wasn't new to traffic stops. Her father had taught her how to stay calm, keep her hands visible, and speak respectfully. But this officer wasn't interested in respect. He didn't explain the reason for the stop clearly. He just accused. "You were all over the road," he snapped. "I wasn't, sir. I kept within my lane. I wasn't even going the speed limit because of the rain." That alone seemed to irritate him. He leaned in closer, noticed her books in the passenger seat, and read the title aloud, Constitutional Law and Civil Liberties. "Cute," he scoffed. "You think studying that makes you some kind of legal expert?" "I'm a student," Maria replied carefully. "I understand my rights. I just want to know why I'm being stopped." That was it. That was the trigger. Daniel's expression darkened. "Step out of the car." Maria hesitated, but only for a second. She knew her rights, yes, but she also knew the risks of escalating a situation with a cop who was already on edge. She stepped out slowly, her heart racing now, not from guilt, but from uncertainty. That's when he made his move. Daniel grabbed her wrist roughly, twisted it behind her back, and slammed the cuffs on with more force than necessary. "You're resisting," he muttered, even though she wasn't. "I'm not resisting. What are you doing?" she asked, trying to stay composed. "You just got yourself 3 charges, he said with a smug grin. Reckless driving, resisting arrest, and verbal aggression. Maria felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. What aggression? What resistance? She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't refused anything. But none of that mattered. He wrote the narrative, and the badge gave it power. At the precinct, Maria was processed like any other criminal. Fingerprints, mugshot, statement taken, and when she asked for a phone call, she was denied. They claimed her phone was evidence. She sat on the cold bench for hours, replaying everything. The injustice, the manipulation, the power imbalance. But she also started planning. Maria wasn't helpless. She had studied cases like this, abuse of power, false charges, civil rights violations. Now, she wasn't just studying one, she was one. Across town, Daniel Brooks was likely writing up a glowing report, convinced the night would end like so many others before. Another person arrested, another case closed, another victim silenced. But what he didn't realize, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that Maria Torres wasn't someone who backed down. She had spent the last 4 years studying exactly how to deal with men like him. Her brain was trained to spot inconsistencies, to find the cracks in false narratives, and to use the law as both a shield and a sword. This time, the story wouldn't end with a dismissed complaint or a silent victim. This time, the badge wouldn't protect him. And by the time she stepped out of that precinct the next morning, free on bail thanks to a friend who rushed in to help, Maria had already made a decision. She wasn't just going to defend herself, she was going to expose him. By the time Maria Torres walked into the courtroom 2 months later, the buzz had already started. Some thought she was crazy, representing herself against a decorated police officer in a system that had repeatedly failed people like her. Most would have taken the plea deal, 3 months probation, a small fine, no jail time, easy, clean, over. But Maria refused to take the easy way out, because this wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about revealing the truth. Dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, Maria walked confidently to the defense table. The courtroom was filled with observers, law students from her university, former clients from the shelter, even 2 local reporters who had caught wind of the student who said no to the system. On the other side sat Officer Daniel Brooks. His usual smugness had been replaced by a tight jaw and shifting eyes. His lawyer, a high-powered city attorney, leaned in and whispered constantly. Daniel didn't look confident. He looked nervous. The judge entered. Court was in session. Maria began her defense not with emotion, but with evidence. First, she submitted traffic camera data. The city's traffic management department had recorded her car at every stoplight. Speed data showed she never exceeded the limit. Then came the receipts, gas station timestamps, her shelter sign-out log, her phone GPS record, which Daniel had tried to withhold from evidence. But the real turning point came when Maria played footage from a stranger's dash cam. A viral TikTok she'd posted after her release, explaining how she was falsely arrested, had reached a driver who'd passed the scene that night. That driver had dashcam footage showing the entire interaction from a distance. Her car pulling over calmly, no reckless driving, and Officer Brooks pulling her out without warning. The courtroom went silent as the grainy video played. Maria stood tall. This shows there was no probable cause for the stop and no resistance at any point. Daniel's lawyer objected, claiming context was missing. The judge overruled him. Maria continued. She brought in character witnesses. A counselor from the shelter testified to her routine, her calm demeanor, and her commitment to helping women in distress. A university professor testified about her academic honesty and passion for law. Even a former police officer, now retired, testified about how the system can protect the wrong people when internal affairs looks the other way. But the most powerful moment came when Maria introduced 3 other women. 3 unrelated women who had all filed complaints against Officer Daniel Brooks in the past 5 years. Their stories were similar, almost identical in some places. Unwarranted stops, aggressive tone, intimidation. All of their complaints had mysteriously gone missing in the system. No follow-up, no investigations, no accountability. Daniel's face flushed. He whispered furiously to his lawyer, who sat frozen. Maria then turned to the jury. There's a pattern here. It's not about one night. It's about years of unchecked abuse. I was educated and resourceful enough to fight back. But how many others weren't? How many walked away humiliated, scared, or even traumatized, believing they had no choice but to stay silent? The courtroom was completely still. Daniel finally took the stand. He denied everything, claimed she was combative, said she talked down to him, and even accused her of trying to make a name for herself. But when Maria asked him on cross-examination why he turned off his body cam moments before approaching her car, he had no answer. He stuttered, deflected, blamed technical errors. Too late. The damage was done. That moment, the hesitation, the crack in confidence, changed everything. The judge took note. The jury, just when everyone thought the courtroom had seen the biggest twist, it got worse. For Daniel Brooks. Much worse. During a break in the trial, Maria's legal mentor, a retired civil rights attorney named Mr. Lawson, handed her a USB drive with a subtle nod. "This might be the nail in his coffin," he whispered. The courtroom reconvened. "Your Honor," Maria said calmly, "I have newly discovered evidence that must be entered into the record immediately." Daniel's lawyer stood up in protest. "Your Honor, this is last minute." The judge raised a hand. "Let's hear what she has." Maria plugged the USB into the courtroom screen. What played next changed everything. It was audio, scratchy at first, but then the voices became crystal clear. Daniel Brooks. "Yeah, she gave me attitude. One of those law school types. Thought she knew more than me. I shut that down quick." Second voice, another officer, laughing. "You actually booked her?" Daniel. "Of course I did. Gave her the full treatment. Said she was aggressive. It'll stick." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Maria paused the recording. This was retrieved from an officer's car radio recorder, not a body cam. This was recorded after the arrest, when Officer Brooks thought no one was listening. Daniel's face went pale. His attorney looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Maria hit play again. Daniel chuckling. "She really thought quoting the Constitution was going to help her. I've done this 100 times. They always back down." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. What had started as a simple traffic stop had now clearly turned into something darker. A personal vendetta, fueled by ego and protected by a system that allowed it. Daniel had just confessed, not in court but casually off the record, exactly what Maria had been saying all along. He hadn't pulled her over for reckless driving. He pulled her over because she dared to question his authority. Maria turned to the judge. This isn't just misconduct, it's calculated abuse of power, and it's not the first time he's done it. The judge leaned forward, slowly removing his glasses. Officer Brooks, do you wish to comment on this recording? Daniel stood, but the words wouldn't come. His mouth opened, then closed. His confidence, the arrogance that had carried him through years of unchecked behavior, was gone. The room waited. No response. Maria sat back, calm but intense. The moment was bigger than her now. It wasn't just about proving her innocence anymore. It was about making sure someone like him never wore a badge again. By the end of the day, the court had launched an emergency internal investigation. Daniel Brooks was immediately suspended from the force pending criminal charges. The other officer in the recording was also called in for questioning. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and microphones swarmed. News outlets ran headlines that night. Law student exposes corrupt cop in shocking courtroom twist. Audio recording destroys officer's defense in abuse of power case. Hashtag Justice for Maria trends nationwide after trial bombshell. Social media exploded. The dashcam footage had already made waves, but the audio? That was the proof people needed. No more doubts. No more he said, she said. It was real, it was raw, and it was damning. Maria didn't bask in the attention, she didn't celebrate. Instead, she met with the three women who had testified before, each of them shaken but grateful. You did what we couldn't, one of them said through tears. You made them listen. Maria smiled softly. Now we make sure it never happens again. The headlines didn't stop for weeks. The story of Maria Torres, the law student who stood up to a veteran cop and brought down a corrupted wall of silence, had gone national. From TV panels to legal blogs to social media hashtags, everyone was talking about the same thing. How did he get away with it for so long? The truth was, Officer Daniel Brooks had worn his badge like a shield and used it like a weapon. He knew the loopholes. He manipulated the reports. He silenced the complaints before they ever became investigations. But not this time. Maria had cracked the armor, and once there was a crack, everything started to crumble. The city's Internal Affairs Division reopened 14 past complaints against Officer Brooks, cases that had mysteriously gone dormant or had been marked resolved with no explanation. Several of those complainants were contacted again, and this time they were heard. The city police chief, under immense public pressure, issued a public statement. We failed. Not just Maria, we failed the community, and we will make it right. But it wasn't just internal affairs that came for Daniel. The district attorney's office launched an official investigation into civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and obstruction of justice. His badge was stripped, his access revoked, and just 3 months after that courtroom bombshell, Daniel Brooks was arrested, not as an officer, but as a citizen, in handcuffs, in front of the same courthouse where he once walked with pride. Maria watched the footage online. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Justice had finally done what it was meant to do, not just punish, but reveal. Still, she wasn't finished. With the help of her mentor, Mr. Lawson, and several civil rights organizations, Maria filed a civil lawsuit against the police department, not just for her wrongful arrest, but for what she called institutional neglect, the repeated failure to act on complaints and protect citizens from abusive officers. Her case became the catalyst for something much bigger, a new citywide policy mandating the automatic review of all dismissed officer complaints after 90 days, a whistleblower protection program for officers who want to report abuse internally, and perhaps most importantly, a law named after her, Maria's Law, which made tampering with or disabling body cameras during an active stop a felony offense. It passed with overwhelming public support. And Maria? She graduated at the top of her class. Offers poured in from across the country, big law firms, non-profits, even government agencies, but she had one goal in mind: open her own legal aid center, a place where women, minorities, and vulnerable citizens could get real help. Not just legal advice, but the power to fight back. And she did it. 6 months later, in a modest office just blocks from the same precinct where she was once fingerprinted and humiliated, Maria opened the Justice Project. Her first client? A young woman falsely accused of theft by a local mall cop who didn't know she had a right to an attorney. Maria looked her in the eye and said, "You're not alone. I've been there, and I promise, this ends differently." As for Daniel Brooks, he was found guilty of multiple counts of civil rights violations, sentenced to 7 years, stripped of all police benefits. His name became synonymous not with bravery, but with abuse and downfall. The man who thought his badge made him untouchable. He was brought down, not by force, not by power, but by a woman he thought he could break. And that's the story the world remembered. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it gave you chills, then don't just watch and scroll. Hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel for more real, powerful stories that expose truth, challenge injustice, and inspire courage. Because sometimes, one story can change everything. Yours might be next.